Good evening. Welcome to River Community Church. My name is Sam. I'm one of the pastors here. Thrilled that you're here tonight. As you can see, there's a little bit of orange around you. There's Blaze Orange Weekend. I'm planning on wearing mine tomorrow. For some reason, I definitely did not put it on today. So I don't get to do this next thing, but if you wore Blaze Orange, even like the smallest little bit, go ahead and grab the connection card in front of you, like even if it's on your socks or maybe your underwear, go ahead and put it, your name and phone number, or just your name on the connection card in front of you and your email address, and put orange on it, and then when the offering comes around a little bit later tonight, put it in there, and you could have a chance to win a Fleet Farm gift certificate. So that's kind of fun. We like to be a little silly. Hopefully those who are actually hunters and are wearing Blaze Orange get themselves what they're hoping for this year. Best of luck to you guys with that. Also, another thing happening tonight is we're going to have a little bit of fun after the service. If you came tonight not knowing what you're doing for dinner, you're welcome, because there's a bunch of Roadhouse pizza showing up in about an hour from now, and it's all going to be downstairs, or less than an hour from now. So if you're hungry, it's coming soon. But it's going to be really delicious. We're going to have like a Friendsgiving. Thursday's Thanksgiving. We thought we'd have some fun with that. Enjoy some stuff downstairs. That should be a good time. So go ahead and go down there after the service for that. No need to bring anything. Just go on downstairs and grab yourself some pizza. That should be fun. If you're new here, or if you haven't been here for a while, what you need to know is that we're in this series called Address the Mess, which is really just that. It's talking about addressing the messes in our lives, not leaving them for later, not stuffing them down, not sticking them in our back pockets, but literally addressing the messes in our lives. This week, we're going to talk about clean up on aisle 4. I don't know if you've ever been in a grocery store where you hear that, right? Clean up on aisle 4. And does any of you, how many of you want to run the other direction? Yes? How many of you want to go check out what it is? Is anybody like that? Yeah? All right, you want to go observe the mess that was made. All right, great. I'm glad those are the ones that are here tonight. All right, before we get into it, though, I thought we'd take a moment and pray together. So would you all take a moment and pray with me? Dear God, we are incredibly grateful that we get to sing and worship to you, and just realize in the moment of singing just how much we need you. Tonight, God, we're talking about cleaning stuff up. Because there are so many times in our lives where there's stuff that needs to be cleaned up, and sometimes we avoid it, sometimes we run the other direction, or sometimes we just don't know what the right option is when we're trying to deal with it and clean it up. So God, we ask for wisdom tonight. We ask that you'd move in our own lives, and we'd leave here knowing how to clean up the messes in our lives. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So, there's some messes in our lives, right, where sometimes you make a mess, and it doesn't just stay messy, it actually gets messier, or there's the opportunity for it to get messier. Have you ever experienced that? Nod your heads if yes. A long time ago, I was on my bicycle. I was riding around on a bike, and I was riding as quickly as I could, quickly enough that I was keeping up with the car in front of me. And I was trying to keep up, and I realized, man, I'm going pretty fast. This is fun. And so in that moment, I'm darting along, and if you're kind of silly like me, you do dumb things like go really close to the car in front of you and draft off of them, which means you can continue to go faster with less effort. And so I was doing this. I was a little too close to the car in front of me, trying to keep up with it, and I looked down at the speedometer in front of me, the thing that's telling me how fast I'm going, and I don't have any idea how fast I was going, because as soon as I did that, I saw something out of my peripheral vision, and it was the car in front of me hitting the brakes. And so I hit the brakes as hard as I can, and I come screeching to a stop, and I go over my handlebars and go up onto the car in front of me. It was awesome, right? Very epic. What a great thing to have happen. And so I go up into this car in front of me, and my bike gets knocked around a little bit, but it happened in such slow motion because everybody was braking at the moment of impact that it wasn't too bad. So the car in front of me, she scoots over to the side, and I was frantic and freaking out, oh my gosh, somebody just crashed a bicycle. A kid on a bicycle is in back of me. And so I get up, I dust myself off, I get off, I'm embarrassed. How could I have done that, right? I crashed into the back of a car. And I'm just trying to play it off, right? This big mess happens, my bike's there, it kind of seems to be working, everything seems fine, I don't feel that bad, I'm not sore, there's nothing broken, the car is in fine shape. go ahead and go, right? That's what I'm thinking. Like, I just want to get away from here. I don't want to have anything happen after this. So the person is like, are you sure you don't need a ride? Are you okay? I say, I'm fine. It's no big deal. Go ahead and drive off. And then I walk a little further, and I get on my bicycle again, right? Because I got to keep on riding to where I'm going. And so I get on my bike without really examining the mess that was made very well, and I begin to go a little further, and I go up a hill. And when you're going up a hill on a bicycle, it's helpful to shift, right? Shifting is helpful. And so I was shifting to an easier gear, which means on the very back of the bike, there's this little derailleur thing, this like thing that changes the gears. So it moves over. And what I didn't know is during the crash that derailleur had been bent. And it had bent to such a degree that as I shifted it over further, it hits the spokes of the wheel and comes crashing off, and I go down again. Number 2. But what's crazy is that when I did that, the reality of it was there was an older bike, and on that older bike, the derailleur was mounted directly to the frame of the bike. And when the derailleur came off, a chunk of the frame came off also. And so the bicycle was rendered useless. It was ruined. Crazy, right? And I had a lot of explaining to do. It was a mess. And it started out as a mess. I crashed into this car, and I bent up my bike a little bit. And I didn't really quite take the time to realize just how messy it was. And so because of that, and because of just shuffling it aside like it's no big deal, I did a couple things that ended up making it messier still. Ever been there? You ever experienced that? Where you take something that's messy and you make it even messier still? I think every mess that we ever experience, it comes with some bad options. Like these options that are just right there for the taking. For example, like riding your bike after it had been broken up and bent and stuff. That's a bad option. It was right there in front of me. I could take it. Also, another bad option is have you ever had a phone where they have like preloaded apps on it? Yes, raise your hand. Yeah, those are never good, okay? Like it comes with these particular preloaded apps that companies paid the phone company to put on there so that you would use them. They're such bad apps that they have to pay people to try and use them. It's like a bad option. You get your phone and you think, oh, I'm just going to click on this app that's there, and you end up using something that's like the worst thing ever. There's bad options that are just right there in front of you. I think it's funny because there are certain things that are just so easy for us to take or click on or do in the midst of our messes. These things that we just have there at our disposal doesn't necessarily mean that just because they're there and they're options, that they're good options, right? That they're the best option. A lot of times we're faced with decisions, and we have a ton of options. And there's good options and not so good options. And as you look through the Bible, there are story after story after story of literally this, right? A person is faced with a situation. They have good options and not so good options. And a lot of the times in the Bible, they take the not so good options. I mean, we have all kinds of examples of that, of like Adam and Eve doing that, of Noah doing some silly things, of Moses doing some things he shouldn't have done. There's all kinds of examples of options that we have. Good options, bad options, a particular situation. Well, there's this one instance that's a particularly good example of this, where someone is faced with this decision to make, and they have a bunch of options. And what they decide to do has a very long-lasting impact on them. It's a messy situation that they got themselves into or that they found themselves in, and they have to choose what to do with it. It has to do with these two men, a man named David and a man named Saul. Saul had been hunting David, like to take his life. And he'd been doing this for quite some time, and David had been fleeing all around the country with his band of men, trying to stay away from Saul. And as he's doing this, Saul's really worried about David taking his throne. And so in doing this, Saul finds that he's chasing after David, and he finds himself in this wilderness area, in the stronghold of En-Gedi, which is basically this area where there's a bunch of caves and mountainous area. And so David, while he sees Saul is coming, goes and hides himself in a cave. And as he's hiding himself in the cave, Saul comes by and he has to relieve himself. He's got to go to the bathroom. And so he makes everybody stop, and he gets off of his camel, and he goes over into the cave that David just so happens to be in. And so there he is in this cave, needing to use the bathroom, and David's in there too. And Saul had been chasing him and chasing him and chasing him, wanting to take his life. This is what the men say that are with David in that cave. It says this in 1 Samuel 24:4. They say, "Now is your opportunity." David's men whispered to him, "Today the Lord is telling you, I will certainly put your enemy into your power to do with as you wish." So they're whispering in his ear. And there Saul is just ahead of him, and he's been in the cave for a while, so his eyes are perfectly adjusted. Saul can't see a thing. So David creeps forward. Have you ever been in that situation? That moment where you can seize an opportunity to get out of the mess you're in an expedited way, a faster way, to just clean the slate as quick as you can. Maybe there's a coworker at work who just drives you nuts, bonkers. You're so frustrated, and they make a mistake. Maybe there's a kid at school who teases you constantly, and it's just so frustrating, but then you're there in that moment watching them as they make that embarrassing mistake, and you see the whole thing happen, this embarrassing situation where you could recount the whole thing. Maybe when your spouse has been on you about something, and they're saying, like, you can't do this, and then you catch them doing it. It'd be awesome, right? That never happens in my house. Just saying. But in that moment, you're in that position of power, right? You're in that position where you are able to do something about it. So what do you do with that position of power? I mean, you got sweet justification because they've been on you about that thing. You get some justice. You've been teased by them. You've been harassed by them. You're frustrated about all the things that they've been doing that have been driving you nuts. It would be awesome to just get what's yours, some payback. And we are good at justifying our actions. We're great at getting revenge, great at evening the score. And Saul had it out for David. David had done nothing wrong to Saul. Nothing. He had not harmed him or offended him in any way possible, and yet Saul was after his life. He was justified. Why not clean the mess up? Why not get rid of it? Now, Saul thought he was doing the right thing because he was frustrated and scared about losing his power. At one point, David had been anointed by Samuel to be the next king. And so Saul knows this thing is coming. And David had killed Goliath at a young age. David was this great warrior, such a great warrior that the people of Israel would sing this song that Saul could hear. It says this in 1 Samuel 18:7. It says, this was their song. Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000s. Wouldn't that be great if you were the king and you heard that? Like you hear about all the things that all the other people are, all this other guy is singing or is doing. Wouldn't that be great? Like you'd be frustrated as can be. It's the greater warrior out there than the king. Saul was so jealous. Saul became so jealous that he tried to kill David. In 1 Samuel 19:10, it's the first instance of it. It says, Saul hurled his spear at David. But David dodged out of the way, and leaving the spear stuck in the wall, he fled and escaped into the night. That was just the beginning. That was just the start of David being on the run. And you know what that also is? That's justification. Being hunted equals justification for retaliation. Like if there's any instance where us as humans think that we're justified, if someone throws a spear at you, you're obligated to defend yourself, right? Like that's how we think. That's how we feel. I wouldn't have been disappointed. I wouldn't have been surprised if he had done it. And there he sits, David, with that dilemma. He's in the cave and he's inching closer and closer to Saul. what's he going to do? What's he going to do when he gets there? And let's be very honest for just a moment. Killing Saul could have been really great for David. I mean, can you imagine he goes there and he's a warrior. He's done his duty. He knows exactly how to do this. He's a killing machine, David is. And so he goes up to Saul. He could have very quickly done the thing, walked out with Saul's head and raised it up and showed everybody that his army was out there. And in that moment, it would have been over. People were already singing David's praises. People were already so excited about this man and wanting him to be king. And there Saul was with his army of people that are following him because he's the king. They would have been ready and willing to follow David in that moment. It would have been a very fast coup. It would have been done and over with. He's like the original Robin Hood. I don't know if you've ever seen this. If you think of Robin Hood, is that who you think of? That's who I think of, Kevin Costner. I don't know if it's you or not. I was looking it up online for a little bit, trying to think of who like Robin Hood would be in your minds. And there's like a newer one, I don't even know who it was, and like older ones with like Disney characters, right? There's all these other options of who Robin Hood is, but that's who I think of. Little Kevin Costner, so you can picture David being Kevin Costner for the rest of the night or not. But in that moment, it was a no-brainer because David was just like him. Everybody loved him. He was that guy that was doing the right thing all the time. And if he would have taken the king's life, nobody would have batted an eye. I bet you've imagined how it would be for you, right? You say that line to that person that's been on your nerves, and you say it just perfectly. It's in this mess, and you kind of get back at them. Or you throw them under the bus, the person who's competing with you for that job, and you throw them under the bus because they deserve it, and they put you in this situation where you're in this mess, and you're trying to get it right, but finally you have this opportunity to make it right. You get the promotion. Maybe at school you've been frustrated by this person that's been harming you or saying terrible things or whatever, and you finally have a moment to really humiliate them in the same way you've been humiliated all these years. You have sweet victory, sweet visions of emerging from your mess in record time. No cleanup on aisle 4 needed, just a quick shortcut to squeaky clean and the life you've always dreamed of. It sounds great in that moment, doesn't it? Nothing to clean up. But is that really the story you want to tell the rest of your life? That you got out of the mess at someone else's expense or through a shortcut? Because here's the thing, the mess you're in right now, I don't know what it is exactly, but the mess you're in right now, eventually, one day, is going to be reduced to a sentence or two. Now, I know that sounds hard or weird or like, no way. That can't be the case. I know right now it feels like that's the defining moment in your life, like the thing that's been agonized over time and time again, and you're in this thick season of exhaustion. It's this mess, and you can't handle it. But eventually, it'll be a sentence or two. Years from now, you'll say, 5 years ago, I lost my job. You'll say, 2 years ago, I failed that test. You'll say, 4 years ago, it was so bad, and we chose to end it, we got a divorce. That's what you'll say. It'll be a sentence. It'll be this terrible, horrible time in your life reduced to a sentence. The mess isn't the story. It's hard to believe, right, that mess wouldn't be the story because that's all you're living right now because it's hard and it's frustrating, but the mess isn't going to be the story. The story you'll tell, or maybe want to tell, is how you reacted to the mess. It'll be your reaction. How you react is what matters. It's what you'll talk about all those years later. It'll be you saying 5 years ago, I lost that job, but then I went back to school and I worked nights to make ends meet, and then I got the job that I've been wanting for a really long time. It'll be 2 years ago, I failed that test and I realized, whoa, I have to study. And so you decide to study and you work at it and you go from a 2.8 GPA through to a 3.7. It'll be 4 years ago, we got divorced and it was hard and frustrated, but we've since forgiven so much in our families, sometimes even sit next to each other in church, and it's still messy, but man, it's amazing what God has done. How much He's done in our lives. What do you want to live with? What do you want to be your legacy? Because it's up to you. It's up to you. What do you want to say when your kids ask about the story? Or when you tell your spouse what happened? Or when you tell your coworkers, employees, or maybe your future employer how you got to where you are? What do you want to tell them? Do you want to feel the need to lie a little bit? Omit a few details, or maybe feel a little bit like a hypocrite? Or do you want something better? Do you want something more solid to stand on? Do you want to follow Jesus? Do you want to follow Jesus through the mess? Because there's what human Sam would do, and there's what Sam who's following Jesus does. Human Sam gets angry really easy. You maybe be surprised by that, but whew. Human Sam gets angry. Human Sam holds on to stuff. Human Sam judges and gets revenge. Human Sam is a whole lot ugly. He takes shortcuts. But Sam who follows Jesus? Sam, when he follows Jesus, waits. Sam who follows Jesus is patient. Sam who follows Jesus knows that the ends never justify the means like you think they will. It's kind of like building a skyscraper. Right? You've got this big old building that you're creating, and it's going way up high, and you're trying to build it as big as you can, and the reality is you could build it higher. You just have to cut some corners to do so. And so you could do that. You could make it the highest skyscraper ever, and you could maybe just cut a few corners, take a few shortcuts, use some different materials that go just a little bit higher, and it'd be awesome, right? You'd be way up on top. You'd be so high up there. It'd be outstanding. Until the wind blows a little too hard. And every last thing comes crashing down around you. You can clean up the mess in your life on aisle 4 by taking some shortcuts or blocking it from view for a while. You can throw some newspapers on it, right? But eventually, the wind's probably going to blow pretty hard again. And the mess just gets bigger. Here's what happened to David. So there he is, and he's creeping along this cave floor on the way to Saul. And in that moment, he decides that he can't take Saul's life. So he pulls out a sword, and he takes this corner of Saul's garment and he begins to saw it off. And he cuts this corner of his garment off. And he walks back to his guys. And Saul finishes business and walks out of the cave. And then read with me what happens next, because it's remarkable. It's a little bit longer, but hang with me. It's 1 Samuel 24, 5 through 12. It says, "But then David's conscience began bothering him because he had cut Saul's robe." That's crazy. He didn't take his life. He cut his robe, and he's still bothered by it. So that's crazy. He said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do this to my lord the king. I shouldn't attack the Lord's anointed one, for the Lord himself has chosen him." So David restrained his men and did not let them kill Saul. After Saul had left the cave and gone on his way, David came out and shouted after him, "My lord, the king." And when Saul looked around, David bowed low before him. Then he shouted to Saul, "Why do you listen to the people who say I am trying to harm you? This very day you can see with your own eyes it isn't true. For the Lord placed you at my mercy back there in the cave. Some of my men told me to kill you, but I spared you. For I said, I will never harm the king. He is the Lord's anointed one. Look, my father, at what I have in my hand. It is a piece of the hem of your robe. I cut it off, but I didn't kill you. This proves that I am not trying to harm you and that I have not sinned against you, even though you have been hunting for me to kill me. May the Lord judge between us. Perhaps the Lord will punish you for what you are trying to do to me, but I will never harm you. Human David was sick of running. Human David wanted to be in charge. Human David should have taken Saul's life. It would have been easier. But David following God, David humbly submitting to God, that David knew it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth doing it. He knew that wasn't the story he'd want to tell his kids one day about how he became king. And he does become king like 7 chapters later. It's not very long. Saul dies in battle. And shortly after that, David's king. Promotions, fame, power, respect. None of these things are worth earning by way of shortcuts. They just aren't. A building standing tall on rickety stilts is no life to live in. It's not very much fun. Wind blows too hard in life too often. You might be here this evening and you just might be really tempted. Tempted to cover up what needs to be cleaned. Tempted to throw some newspaper on it. To walk away and hope nobody notices. It'd just be so much easier. No one would know. It's not a big deal. Look at what I'll get out of it. I'll get further in life and I just will ignore that thing in the past. You'll think to yourself, I need to get out of this mess, and I feel like this is the only option available to me. Remember those options that are right there in front of you? There is another way. There is a different way. You can choose to follow Jesus through your mess. You can. Your mess is messy, but the mess is there no matter what. It either eats at you, gets worse later when the wind blows too hard, or it gets addressed here and now with Jesus. Choice is really yours. But here's what you need to know about following Jesus through and out of your mess. Number one is this: you will not be judged for your mess by Jesus. There's this person that Jesus met. When Jesus was looking up at a tree at a man named Zacchaeus, he didn't judge him for his lying and cheating when he collected too much tax. No, he didn't at all. He invited himself over for dinner. And that was a tremendous honor in those days. He goes over to his house for dinner, this person who's sinning a ton. Number two, you will be faced with your mess. It's there, and you have to address it. We don't know what happened at that dinner when Jesus invited himself over, but I imagine that they had a talk. That they sat there and chatted about life and maybe some of the decisions he'd made and where he was at with them and maybe his guilt or frustration with them. And out of this conversation, I picture it where Zacchaeus is really just doing the most talking. And Jesus like, yeah, I know, but I love you anyways and you're forgiven, all those kinds of things. I feel like Zacchaeus would have been like an hour of conversation and Jesus says like 5 words and he's like, oh, okay. Because number 3, you can expect action paired with redemption. The crazy thing about being around Jesus is that he leads you to do stuff, and it's not judgment. You're actually like excited to do it. You want to do what he wants you to do because you can see the difference it makes when you get closer to Jesus. Because later that day, look at what happens. Zacchaeus says this: meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said, I will give half my wealth to the poor, Lord, and if I have cheated people in their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much. That mess got cleaned up, not multiplied by even more years of lying and cheating. It got cleaned up right there and then. Can you imagine being Zacchaeus, waking up the next morning, He just had this remarkable day. Jesus invited himself over for dinner, and I met with him, and then I chose to do this thing that I know is right, and I know is following Jesus, and I know I've got forgiveness, and I'm finally free. Wouldn't that feel so amazing? To wake up so much lighter than you've been for years. Wouldn't that feel so good? Don't you want that? Don't you want that in your life, to wake up feeling light and free and like you can face the day because you're not carrying the stuff from the mess that you've been avoiding? Wouldn't it be great to just give it to Jesus and talk through it and do what he says and be done? To move past it? You can have that. You can have that lightness and that freedom. And if you do, that's how I'm going to end. Because I think it's that simple. It is choosing to follow Jesus, knowing he won't judge you, knowing that he'll meet you right where you're at, and then he'll offer you an option forward. He'll offer you a way forward. If you want that for yourself, if you want to step out of that mess and not make it messier, but clean up the mess on aisle 4, would you pray with me? Dear God, we are just incredibly grateful that you love us even when we're filled with messes. God, we ask that as we think about those messes, as we know that they're there, that we wouldn't just cover them up, that we wouldn't just try and fix them with some shortcuts, that we would know that following you is the better way. And God, I ask that you would help us to choose your option, that we would know that that's the option that we have in front of us, that we could follow your son Jesus and be faced with that mess, know that we're not judged, but then choose to follow him through it, to have action paired with redemption, to wake up free and light. Help us to know the one step we need to take going into tomorrow, going into the night, to help make that difference. We pray this in Jesus' name.